Okay, that underscores something. In the last 10 years, the two single largest pieces of public land in Ottawa have been, they're each about 40, 50 acres. It's been LeBreton Flats and it's Lansdowne. So I think we all know what happened when LeBreton Flats, in this case the NCC, but it's still our public land, was turned over to a developer with the suggestion that the developers know best and they'll take care of our public interest. So, you know, if you just want to kind of, and this is actually the LeBreton is low density development, right? Because that's a little bit on the edge of our city, whereas the OSEC proposal is immediately downtown, and so this is a much higher density. So again, I wanted to make sure that everybody's reminded of you know, dangers of turning over our public interest into private interest for profit. I also want to point out that with the OSEG scheme, it's built upon this kind of open shopping mall. So it's not the Rio Center, it's more like kind of, you know, sections of strip mall with a lot of open air about what's going on elsewhere on the planet. So if we think, it's been said, oh, what do we need another park for? First of all, Ottawa, if we look at this comparison here, at the point, so Manhattan, 1850s, when Manhattan decided to build Central Park, Manhattan only existed at the very, very tip, right? So the entire Manhattan Island was one enormous swath of farmland. So when the city fathers decided, hey, we want New York to become the world's economic engine, and they decided how to do that, that there was a suggestion to just drive a grid and streets over the entire island, and then kind of the more enlightened, kind of humane, and actually we're kind of social activists, said, no, no, what you really need is a park. And if you put in a park, you're going to attract, you're going to create the single greatest amenity. And of course it makes sense that if you have great density, the single greatest amenity is not shops and boutiques. You can get all that online, by the way, nowadays. But it's about getting an urban park, which you don't get online. And the other thing, so, but these social people, these social workers who are fighting for the park are very shrewd, because what they said is, hey, you know what, folks, if you take this approximately 150-acre site, which is in the middle of this wilderness, and you designate it to be a park, overnight you're going to get real estate speculation. So, sure enough, overnight the land values surrounding the park, the yet unbuilt park, went up 5-fold. So there was a huge amount of increase in the tax dollars for, again, this is overnight, just upon speculation. So this is to say that the monies needed to pay for the park very quickly and also to build and maintain the park were provided by the tax dollars coming in from those affluent people who were fortunate enough to buy land on Fifth Avenue or Central Park West. Now, this isn't to say that this is an elitist proposal, because anybody who's been to Stanley Park, or for example, Central Park, knows very well that the entire city goes there. You have every walk of life, you have every ethnicity, every kind of social, demographic, economic demographic. That yes, it happens to be that people who pay more taxes invariably end up paying more for these urban amenities, but they're absolutely public enterprises that everybody in our cities participate in. We just have to walk a few extra blocks, which is fun. So we have Stanley Park. So before Vancouver was 1 million, they had allocated 1,000 acres, and we all know what the development around Stanley Park is like. The quality of housing, which is to say, this sounds a little bit backwards, but it's sort of like you build it and they will come. You put in the park, and that will drive development. It's not the other way around. If you put in development first, you're going to scare away, basically, the citizens, because nobody wants to be around a congested, crowded mall. I'm going to have to really speed this up now, but let's get the next image. I just want to point out that how other cities, New York for example, is maniacally, it's run out of space on Manhattan, so rather here we are in Ottawa giving away, we're not even selling, we're giving away public land to a developer, whereas in other cities they're maniacally trying to aggregate any scrap of land that could be turned into a public amenity, because again, Mayor Bloomberg, one of the wealthiest men on the planet, is decided this is the way to turn Manhattan into a yet more powerful economic engine. So it's about finding industrial pieces of land and turning them into parks, and whatever that might mean. So what we have here, for example, is the transformation of a series of industrial piers that are turned into linear parks, and we have this elevated rail line that was serving this kind of decrepit warehouse district, and so this is abandoned 50 years ago. Next. So now we see what has happened, and this has happened within a few years, the transformation of these derelict piers. Sometimes they're so derelict they only had literally these logs in the water. So these piers are turned into parks. Some are for children, some are for kind of more elderly people, some are for sunbathers. So you have many different parks, and what's happened is within a few years, this is just to kind of prove this point about parks drive economic development, not the other way around, that these warehouses have either been turned into housing or they've been replaced by these upscale buildings. And of course now, like for example, this is where Nicole Kidman is living, so everybody wants to live in this great new neighborhood. But I assure you, Nicole Kidman is not lying out on the sun on this pier here, but it's everybody who lives the next street back and the next street back who's profiting by Nicole's tax dollars who avail themselves of this park. So again, it's a little bit kind of a complicated set of developments of a neighborhood, but it benefits everybody. Next. Again, on the left, we see the transformation of this elevated rail line into a linear park. On the upper left, we have a hotel not designed by OSEG, which happens to straddle the park. So it's paying huge revenue to the city for the right to be able to have one stair connect to that park. And this is now the most expensive hotel in New York City because they want to be associated with this upscale park. And I want to remind ourselves too that the canal, as beautiful as it is not a park. It's a very beautiful kind of running track. It's very beautiful to drive by. Many of us enjoy it, but it is not a public park. And what the city fathers have been giving to us is more like Purcell Park, which is on the upper right, which this is not acceptable. These are not economic drivers. So when I talk about turning Lansdowne into a park, I'm not talking about anything we've seen thus far. Next. And it's not just the New York Cities or the Bostons who take down their expressways and build parks on top of that. So they're transforming their infrastructure into, again, park spaces. So in the middle, we see Hull. Even our kind of, our slightly, less affluent neighbor is clever enough to have figured this out. So they take their streets and they turn them into these boulevards, which are already being filled in by higher kind of tax-paying industries. And then I think about Ottawa and what our kind of city administration has been able to pull off here, the before and after of King Edward. Next. Anybody who reads design press is completely aware of all of these examples. So there's nothing radical in what I'm proposing, and they figured out Central Park 150 years ago. And to bring this all home, let's think about the canal, right? Once upon a time, our canal, which was built for military purposes, also became the route for industrial, for-profit rail lines. We have Mackenzie King, who had the vision to turn it into a serious public amenity, and it is one of the prides, in fact, now of the world. It's a World Heritage Site. And to take Lansdowne and to turn it into a shopping mall would be the equivalent of taking our canal and then selling it off again to private industry.